Hello everyone, thank you for tuning into this new video. I'm VTdev, and what you're looking at today is a personal project I've been working on for the last 2 weeks. I've recently picked up Blender again, having not touched it for a couple of years, and the first thing I wanted to do was build a house. On the screen now, you will see the components of my house. We have the essentials like the sword, wand, and goblin training dummy, and the less important things like brick foundation, inner and outer walls, and a door. Many of the textures you can see on these models were created in the shading editor of Blender, being baked to image textures and exported as PNGs before being applied as a material. This includes roughness and bump textures as well, which can be seen on some of the models. To understand why these specific models were created, let's begin with the diagrams I made. I knew that I wanted to create a middle-class type house with a garage and a white picket fence to denote that the family in the game comes from wealth or has decent paying jobs. From this idea, I sketched out a quick 4x4 square in Photoshop, surrounded by fences on all sides except where the garage might lead. From there, I took 2 side-by-side squares and sectioned out how I expected the interior to look. On the main floor, I wanted at least one bedroom, which is most likely where one or both of the children will sleep. I need a garage, living room, kitchen, dining room, and stairs. Everything else came after I had decided what to do with the basement and second floor. On the second floor, I wanted a sunroom, some storage, a master bedroom, and a guest room. The extra rooms ended up being either bathrooms or bedrooms. In the basement, I wanted a cold storage room, a game room, and an entertainment room where the parents would bring guests, away from the prying eyes of difficult children, to drink and watch sports and just relax with their friends. Since the basement would be dimly lit, this would act as a kind of dangerous zone for the kids, deterring players from going into the dark too quickly. Once the diagrams were done, I created a list of all the possible items I would want in the game, and sorted them by whether they are required for the game to make stylistic or logical sense, and how difficult they would be to make in Blender. I ended the list with 173 models for now, that could be made by me with varying degrees of time and effort. I then sorted the list and prioritized based on their requirement, and then their complexity, ranked from 1 to 5. I then started working down the list, starting with anything that had a requirement of 5 and a complexity of less than 3. So far, in the 2 weeks I've had to work on this project while I was in between other tasks, I created 47 of the models I think I could work with and would be necessary for a minimum viable product. Of course, if I wanted to just make the game, I could go to Sketchfab, import some models, and immediately start coding, but what I want to do with this game is show that I'm capable of not just as a programmer, but as a 3D modeler and set designer, storyteller, and a game enthusiast. So, for a few examples of models that had a requirement of 5 and a complexity of 1 or 2, that would be walls, stairs, tables, doors, just generic things that don't require excessive details. They get progressively more complex, requiring a torus for handles on doors, or some bevel smoothing or extruding and knife insertions for garbage cans. A television set required extruding inward and splitting for reflective qualities in the shader. The first aid kit required more than a couple of minutes to make the texture and then export. The penguin lunchbox required extruding the wings and beak, coloring each area without going too far, and then exporting the texture. Since the majority of the models so far are shaped simply, Smart UV or just unwrapping in general was not required for baking. All of the objects you see in this scene were made in Blender using a simple combination of cubes and cylinders and toruses and planes with Blender's default editing and sculpting tools. For the purpose of the game I want to make, the game itself is divided into 4 playable areas: outside, main floor, second floor, and basement. I'm ignoring basically every element of real-life house building like infrastructure, electrical wiring, pipe laying, and basic symmetry, just focusing on getting a house up that actually looks like a house while far away or up close. This means that since you could be outside and peer through the windows, the main floor should have enough detail in it so that if someone was to look in from the outside steps, they would be able to see things inside. Since the player should not be able to see the second floor or basement, we do not need to load any materials beyond just the outer appearance for those. In order to document what I was doing, I took screenshots of the models I made while in Blender and when the textures and models got imported to Unity. Once I had the inner and outer walls, the railings, the picket fence, the doors, the windows, and the brick done, I started to block out the center area for the house. I jotted down where in each room there should logically be a window and got to work creating the set details. When the main floor was done, I rotated one of the inner walls and used it as a cover to separate the first and second floor. I then made the second floor according to the diagram, and voila, the middle class suburban white picket fence style. As we go inside and poke around a bit, probably the first thing you'll notice is that it looks like a Windows 95 screensaver. When I first took a look through the main floor, it immediately reminded me of the 3D Maze screensaver. Let's do a little comparison and see side by side how it looks. Okay, yeah, that's actually hilarious. And to be honest, the second floor isn't very different compared to the first floor. If you're wondering why the house is so vertically tall, it's a stylistic choice I had made early on. Because you're playing the game from a child's perspective, looking up at a 2-story house, the vertical length would absolutely be exaggeratedly elongated. I've yet to decide how I want to proceed regarding the camera and player movement, which I'll have to think about and will probably be in a future video. Since I mentioned having a sword, a wand, and a goblin training dummy, you could probably guess what kind of genre this game will end up being. It's going to be a lot of work for one person, but the gain is not in releasing the game, but in being able to demonstrate what I can do. Oh, and before I forget, I've also made some simple and fun animations. One is for the sword to hover. One for the fridge to open. Oh, that's not supposed to happen. Okay, let's turn off looping. Yeah. One for the drawers to open and fall to the ground. And one for the goblin training dummy being attacked and recoiling. Let's take a quick look at how things have been organized. First, the light. If I delete it, it affects the whole scene. For spatial reasoning, I've blocked out a 4x8 grid that will be used later on. I have the camera attached to the player, just makes it easier. All my display pieces are put together under an empty object. Each individual layer for the basement, main floor, second floor, roof, and exterior are all placed into their own separate empty objects so that I can take them apart easier if I need to. I also wanted to do a quick little show of how I go about working in Blender. I'm going to make a garbage can, so I'll start off by deleting the default cube and grabbing a cylinder. I squash it down and try to spike the corners, but eventually I give up on that idea and move on to just extruding the base up, insetting, and then extruding down. This gives me the rough shape that I can further mold and scale out. After I'm happy with the size of the open face garbage can, I go into shading and try a couple of colors to see if there are any that stand out to me. I tried green first, then yellow, but neither of them ended up being particularly appealing. So I went with a neutral brown and gray color. Saved the dot blend, and exported the image texture as a PNG. When finished with the open face garbage can, I begin making my humanoid that I'll be using soon for the camera, movement, and collision detection scripts. Starting with a cube, then duplicating it and mirroring it on the x-axis. Once I've confirmed the mirroring is working as intended, I extrude from the bottom, turn off clipping, and extrude once again to make the legs. I use G to separate them so they don't look stuck together, and finish off by making the lower leg. I'm also scaling down the legs in order to get the proper shape. After that's done, I move to the torso, extruding for upper and lower arms, and then fiddle around with inset extrude until I realize I should just move the vertices against the mirror. I then blow up the head bigger, like blowing into a balloon, and there it is. My vaguely humanoid person that I will be using for general testing purpose. The last step is to throw him into shading, give him a pinkish skin color, and horrifically black eyes with mascara running down its face. The skin color was giving me a bit of trouble, so I opted to go directly into the image texture and paint across it myself, which is useful if one particular piece of the texture is eluding you. The final step is to import both of our new dot blend into Unity and attach the PNG to materials. Then we attach the materials to the dot blend and put them into the scene. To finish off this video, let's take a quick look at all the models and details. My favorite among the models I have made and textured so far is definitely the penguin lunchbox. The finish on the white painted fence is also barely noticeable, which I think gives it a nice level of authenticity. And the first aid kit and bed frame are also some of the nicest textures to come out so far. I definitely need more practice if I want to make a complete game out of all of this work though. I'm hoping that by making this video showing my progress, I incentivize myself to keep going, as I've recently had some trouble staying motivated. Over the next few months to half a year, I plan on periodically working on this project and slowly building it and fleshing it out. So you might be asking, okay, so what's next? Well,